G'day everybody, Kate Fantanel or Lady Liberty Australia here. I am sitting here with one of probably the leading candidates in the presidential nomination race. This is Michael Rectenwald. Michael, thanks for being on my show.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
You're running on a Wreck the Regime platform.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that for the Australians back home. What do you want to wreck exactly?
Well, the regime consists of the federal government, of course, but also all of its appendages and accomplices, like big pharma, big tech, all of the corporations that it enrolls to not only govern us, but to control us and to rob us. So wrecking the regime means taking on that whole constellation, the state and all its appendages. And that means dismantling as much of the state as we can, and then also disengaging the state from these corporate partners and big tech, big pharma, and the military-industrial complex, of course.
Yes, of course. Now, you've also said, I've read your website before, that you used to be an avowed Marxist.
Mm-hmm.
So how does an avowed Marxist go from that to the Libertarian Presidential Candidate, potentially nominee, because that's quite a big swing?
Well, listen, I had a major gestalt shift back in 2016. when I recognized that my compeers on the left were totalitarians. And they came after me for speech that they didn't approve of, tried to savage my academic career. I was a professor at NYU for 11 years. And just for speaking up against some of the developments that I saw as very pernicious, like instituting a bias reporting hotline that students could use to report their professors for bias infractions and microaggressions, kind of Stasi state system, the shutting down of speakers, and on college campuses they weren't allowing diversity at all of thought. And of course, like the safe space, safetyism and all that, which was a way of people effectively shutting down other speech. So I noticed that this wokeness thing was not just a kind of personal frenzy or a frenzy among individuals. It was actually a totalitarian ideology being rolled out. And I think it comes from the state itself. And it's about controlling the population, censoring our speech, making it illegal to say certain things and to hold certain thoughts. I was condemned by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group at NYU for, as they put it, the content and structure of my thinking. In other words, they condemned me for wrong think. And so I wouldn't have it. I immediately became a civil libertarian, and then immediately delved into the libertarian philosophy, political philosophy, personal and social philosophy, economic theory, and I was a major convert, and I have been speaking, writing, and championing the cause of liberty ever since. I became a writer for the Mises Institute. I've written 142 articles from the libertarian perspective for them. I've spoken as the keynote speaker at some of their major events, and I toured the country, and I wrote 5 books from a libertarian perspective.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you might be shocked to learn in Australia at the moment the government are pushing forward a misinformation bill where they can become the arbiters of truth.
Yes.
And decide what is published on the internet or not. We are going through a big censorship movement at the moment in Australia. What are your thoughts on that the government are the ones who will be able to say what is true and what isn't?
Well, they're trying to do the same thing in the United States. They had a disinformation board.
Even with your First Amendment?
Yes. They've been infringing the First Amendment on a regular basis. They had, as you know from the Twitter files, several agencies of the federal government were in control of Twitter, Facebook, and other social media in order to censor and to banish certain speakers from their platforms. And they were saying that they were the ones who were the arbiters of disinformation and misinformation. All the while, incidentally, they were actually spreading misinformation and disinformation themselves about everything from lockdowns to vaccines to masking, social distancing, the whole 9 yards of the COVID tyranny. They were making it effectively impossible to oppose this regime. And this also has a globalist element. There's the UN and the World Economic Forum. They've been driving these campaigns to censor and control social media and other speech. We had just recently seen laws or resolutions passed in Congress to make the expression of anti-Zionism, anti-Semitic, and then to make anti-Semitism effectively a punishable offense for college students, just because of the protests of the Israeli onslaught on Gaza. All this is totally outrageous. The state has no business interfering in our speech at all. And so I would work to dismantle that connection between the state and these accomplices and overturn these kinds of resolutions that are prohibitions against free speech.
Another thing you talked about just before in the presidential debate was immigration and borders, which is a huge issue in America. We are having similar issues in Australia, and your idea was about sponsoring people who want to come here and letting them work.
That's right.
Would you sponsor me to come here to work?
Better believe it.
You did get a bit of pushback from that from the crowd because
a little bit.
The libertarians are very divided on this issue. Some
Yes.
people don't want open borders, some people want controlled borders. So what is your official stance? It's sponsoring people who want to come here to work?
It's a privatization policy. In other words, we need to privatize, like everything else, we need to privatize immigration. So the invitation system is to privatize it, to leave it in the hands of individuals who will sponsor those that they invite to immigrate. And what does that do? It eliminates the humanitarian crisis, first of all, of people being incited and being incentivized to come here because they're getting social welfare payments and so forth, and then living in squalor or on the streets, in gymnasiums, in school gyms, and unfortunately too in plush hotels. I mean, all this social welfare distributed to incoming immigrants has to end to stop artificially incentivizing immigration. And then, of course, the war on drugs has to end because that's leading to the cartels who are controlling the drug market, whereas the drug should be completely legal and produced by legitimate manufacturers who label their products and give out information on it. And, of course, all drugs should be legal. And then, of course, the military and political interventionism of the United States has caused a lot of this problem by displacing people and making it impossible for them to live where their lives have been ruined, largely by U.S. foreign policy. So that's another element. And then the free trade element. We have restricted trade from many countries, causing those people who live there not to have opportunities where they live. So all of those things I would absolutely eradicate.
You were also asked in the speech, which was very entertaining, very exciting, about who your favourite founding father was, and it wasn't a founding father, but it was Thomas Paine, who was, of course, influential on the founding fathers, rights of man, of course.
Right.
Do you have a favourite Thomas Paine quote or a motto that you live by?
My favorite book is Rights of Man by Thomas Paine. So I'm not too much of a sloganeer. I'm kind of the guy that reads. I read the whole books. Okay. Thomas Paine is somebody I've read his entire oeuvre, and I find it very important. And as I said during the debate, I actually share his birthday.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I also share the hometown with Ron Paul.
Yes. Well, my birthday is remember the 5th of November, which is Guy Fawkes Day, which is very fitting as well. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, did you follow what Australia was doing during those dark early years of 2020? Do you have any thoughts on that? And how did it make you feel? There's a lot of Americans, when I say I'm Australian, they say I'm so sorry for what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see our quarantine camps? Did you see our forced vaccination programs? And how did that make you feel watching from afar?
Well, it actually made me take action. I wrote about this quite a bit and talked about it, and I looked at it as a foreboding for what could come to the United States. And I saw people being beat up and gassed for going outside of a certain perimeter. I saw a man who sneezed in an elevator become the subject of a national manhunt. I saw dogs being shot because they were supposedly to protect people. This was just unbelievable. And then I heard that, and I read rather, that there was an app that you had to respond to, and if you didn't respond within 15 minutes, they would come to your house to make sure you were there.
That's true, yes.
So I wrote all about this, spoke about it in numerous venues. So I was on top of the whole Australian situation, which was really scary to me.
Yes.
It scared me to death because I thought, if they do it there, they could do it here. And we look at Canada the same way.
Yes.
They do things and we go, we're next, because this is just how it rolls out, you know. Other Anglophone countries being criminalizing all kinds of things like dissent, like they did in Canada with truckers' protests, freezing their bank accounts and confiscating their vehicles, ruining their lives, just unbelievable. And Australia was, I thought, of all the so-called democracies in the world, was the worst case scenario.
Yes. The only thing I would say is I don't think it could happen here because you have the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. I'm a big shooter. I advocate for gun owners in Australia. It's a very hard battle because we do not have your Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Right. What are your thoughts on the 2A? Do you defend it?
Oh.
Everyone should have the right to bear arms.
My belief in the right to bear arms is actually more fundamental than what the Second Amendment states. And that is, first and foremost, gun ownership is a property issue. It's a property right. I have the right to own whatever I can pay for or create. There was recently a guy that's been getting a prison sentence for printing and creating his own gun. Digital printing or whatever they call it. The name escapes me.
3D printing. Yes.
3D printing, right. So it's a property right first and foremost. And then self-defense is also a right that is inherent to each person. We have a right to our possession of our own selves and a right to defend that and our property. So I'm a massive 2A supporter, but I even go more fundamental than the Second Amendment. It is a property right, first and foremost.
Well, you might be shocked, or you might already know, that Australians do not have the legal, practical ability to exercise our right to self-defence by lethal or non-lethal means. We are told if an intruder is coming into your house, and even me as a responsible gun owner trained in pistols and a champion pistol shooter, I am not allowed to use that against someone attacking me. I am told to call the police. That is the nation that has been created in Australia.
Unbelievable. How far your country has fallen, really. It's a tragedy. So that's why I'm running an international campaign. I want to get the message of libertarianism to the world.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you do get the nomination, we'll find out hopefully today. Mm-hmm. You said you would be going to colleges
mm-hmm.
and trying to educate college students. Do you think you'll get a warm welcome?
Well, I know what kind of welcome I'll get because, listen, I was on these college campuses. There'll be protests because I was deemed like a reprobate by, the woke hegemon. But I'm going to be invited through Young Americans for Liberty. And I'm hoping they attract detractors because I will get through to these people. I know how to reach them because I know where they're coming from because I was there. and I understand the kind of indoctrination they've undergone, what the premises they consider to be true without examination, and how to battle those, how to knock them down. They've been miseducated. It's a travesty. So I re-educated myself through self-study, through autodidacticism, really. And I'll help to re-educate these people. I don't mean like in a camp. I mean like by appealing to their reasoning and appealing to their sensibilities and their sense of justice.
Well, Michael Rectenwald, thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute bloody pleasure to be here. Wreck the Regime, that's his campaign. Follow him online. He might be the Libertarian Presidential Candidate by the end of today. Thank you again. We'll do our cheers with our vapes after the show, but thanks again.
Thank you so much.